Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Two middle-aged guys try to work it all out. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Two Middle-Aged Guys Trying to Work It All Out. How are you today, Dave?
Oh, man, I'm really feeling my middle-agedness today.
Yeah, I get that. I feel it, too. I feel it every day.
Yeah, we need to think ahead. I just curious. In 20 years, are we going to call this too elderly?
Well, it's kind of like,
worked it all out?
I mean, the Pet Shop Boys are in their 60s now.
They're no longer boys.
They didn't change it to Pet Shop Men, so, I think we're okay. I think we can always be middle-aged guys.
Oh, I love a good Pet Shop Boys joke. The kids love it. They're like, oh, gosh, those guys. I'm going to listen to them.
I scored us another couple of listeners right there with that. We need the Pet Shop Boys episode. All right. Anyway, yes, middle-agedness is all around. They say you're only as old as you feel, which pegs me about 115. But that's good. And welcome to another episode. We're grateful to have you guys listening to us.
Yes.
At last episode, we talked about the website that we have. We still have it. It hasn't gotten shut down.
Nope.
It is the number 2middleagedguys.com. And go there to listen to the podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast from there. And most importantly, you can email us from there.
We want to hear from you.
We do. We'd love to hear not only your take on the subjects that we have, but also if you got something you want to hear us jive about for an hour.
You know what I would love to hear from our listeners? Tell us how you found us. We know how, Chris, your mom found us.
Sure.
And my wife, she listens, and she'll probably email anonymously and ask us to stop.
Okay.
Just stop the whole program.
Please do not come and record this podcast.
Please stop. My husband needs to get a part-time job, and this is distracting him. No, I'd love to hear how you found us. That's always an interesting story, right?
Absolutely. That would be great. I think we're on all the major podcast places now. Yep. So if we missed anything, if you have a podcast repository that you would like us to be hosted on as well, let's talk. We can figure that out.
That's right.
jimspodcasts.com.
Yeah, and if you're from Manscaped and you want us to start doing commercials and really creep out our listeners. I'll say there's a podcast that I love. It's two guys. They actually, listening to them, inspired me to talk to Chris and do this. And they started doing Manscaped commercials. And I remember messaging them on Facebook saying, guys, this is terrifying. And then they stopped. I don't know if they stopped because of that. Maybe it was many other people saying, please stop talking about shaving things. And,
that's fair. I wouldn't want to talk about that. But hey, if you need to build a website with Squarespace, I'd be happy to talk about that for some money.
I don't know what I do for a living is primarily look at spreadsheets. So I can look at your spreadsheet.
That's if we had
my head is hung in chains, folks.
If Microsoft Excel wants to sponsor the podcast,
they could. Man, we just haven't sold enough Excel. We really got to. They're trying to figure out how to penetrate that market.
There's so many other great spreadsheet programs. All right. Well, very good. We'll let you know if we ever pick up a sponsor, folks.
You'll know all about it.
It's probably not going to happen. But anyway, I have a little game to play with you, Dave, because you surprised me with a game in the last episode, and now I'm surprising you with a game.
All right, let's do it.
Here it is. The zombie apocalypse has happened. What three people, not including family or friends, what three people do you want? They have to currently be alive, so we assume assume that they survived the zombie apocalypse outbreak. What three people do you want in your survival party?
Wow. Okay. Bear Grylls. I think that's an obvious one. Tom Cruise. Because there's nothing he's going to. He's going to be running around. The zombies will be in awe of him, and they will. They just gonna. I loved Maverick. Top Gun Maverick was so good. I know my brain is rotting, and I'm possessed by some evil, which no one will understand. But I can't bear myself to eat Tom Cruise. That's what that's me talking like a zombie. They have that sort of gosh darn it.
Absolutely.
So we got Bear Grylls, and we got Tom Cruise. I'm afraid he might even distract us, and we would be eaten. The third one is, boy, this is getting tough. No family. They have to. They have to be alive, which means no fictional characters.
That's true.
Gosh. Boy, this is a real tough one. So,
and I gave you no advance warning.
No, this is me.
This is live, folks.
I think that having Chris Angel on my team would be really good. He'd probably make us disappear, and we'd end up, and then he's basically like a real life John Constantine for our listeners. If you know who that is,
then this is the podcast
detective.
for you.
This is the podcast for you. So I think that I've got the right team. Unfortunately, I should have picked someone strong to carry me. I think that's my real weakness is I can't run at all. No, I'm going with those three, and I feel like it's a very entertaining choice, if nothing else.
I agree. And your reasons for picking Tom Cruise are spot on. I wish I'd thought of that myself. But my three. Adam Savage from Mythbusters fame.
Oh, my goodness.
Adam Savage is tested.
Yep, that's a good one.
He's going to be able to build anything we need him to build. He's going to come up with some great ideas. I'm going to have Guy Fieri.
If the zombies take over, the guy could help them figure out ways to make you taste better. It goes both ways.
So it does go both ways. I'm thinking he can help. He's going to know what we can eat. He's going to know how to cook it. And I'm also, bonus point, I'm going to hope that the zombie apocalypse mellows him out a little bit.
That would be my concern, right? If the zombies pick up on sound waves and if he's always yelling like boom and Flavor Town, you might have to ask him to chill.
I might. So there is a little caveat to that choice. And then third, because we need a fighter, because I'm not going to do it, and I don't think Adam and Guy are really going to do it either. So I picked Michelle Yeoh.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say Steven Seagal.
No. He's past his prime.
Well, zombies could feast on him for days while you guys get away. What a great, interesting choice. And now here's my worry. Like after about 2 weeks, when Guy Fieri doesn't have the product, what does he look like?
That's a good question.
He's like, whoa, what?
I don't know. And I mean, I'm assuming Apocalypse, you're not going to have an endless supply of Hawaiian shirts.
No.
So
he's going to have to go to the Tommy Bahama. He's going to have to stock up on those.
Yeah. So, but I think in a end of world situation, he's going to be a good guy.
Michelle Yeoh's a solid choice.
Well, somebody's got to save our butts.
Somebody, yeah. Yeah. Wow, I've never thought about that.
So there you go. There's your 6th episode game.
Yep. Oh boy.
3 people for the zombie apocalypse.
All right.
All right, Dave.
What are we figuring out today?
What we're figuring out today, it's not so much we're figuring things out. It's more of we're coming to terms with our souls. We're figuring out what's meaningful to us. And the topic today is bring 3 influential albums from our lives to the forefront.
Albums that mean something.
Exactly. Now, I'm going to say that does not mean these are the 3 greatest albums of all time.
That's a different conversation.
Exactly right.
That's a conversation everybody's had, right? I don't know if we need to ever have that conversation.
Probably not.
Because everybody's talked about it, but we're talking about things that, like, at that place and time had an impact. Or that you reverberated to today, into this room.
That you carry with you, that has meaning. So, yes, that is our topic today. And I'm going to ask you, my friend, to kick us off with your first album.
I picked a sequence here on purpose. So I will start out. First of all, I wonder if we should guess, right? All right, I'm going to, in my head, guess a couple of yours, and you could do a couple of mine at the end. Let's see. Let's kind of line up, right?
I would be shocked.
Or we can do it in the moment, too.
I'll be shocked if you guess any of mine.
Okay. Well, there's, I've certainly got one that is going to come right out of left field. Maybe not. Well, the first one, okay, goodness, they're all going to start out with this, I think. But 1995, right? So let's envision me in 1995. Yeah. I have a gold Mitsubishi Eclipse, which is very 1995 cool. Yeah. In it is a 6-disc CD changer.
Nice. Mounted in the trunk?
Mounted, of course. Okay. Mounted in the hatchback.
Yeah.
It's also, because there's no aux input, it's using an FM receiver, which means that all my CDs sound terrible.
Yes.
But I got it. It's cool, right? I'm looking cool. My first real car, my first real job. Framing this up, right? It's actually not 1990. 1995 is when this album came out, but this is there's a through line with the next album here.
Okay.
In 1995, that's me in 97. I'm going to get to that in just a moment. In 1995, an album was released that impacted my life, and it changed my view of music and how creative it could be, and it really set a tone for all music for me. And it became a measuring stick for years for how I looked at music. And that album is David Bowie's album, Outside. You knew where this was going. It's like, oh, there's no, the rest of it may be a little bit of a shock.
As soon as you said 1995.
1995, this comes out. And how this came out, and I wish I would have saw this, but you knew, like, I had the internet at this time, and it was, immensely slow and painful.
Yeah.
But I knew that it was coming out, and I was sort of a burgeoning David Bowie fan, right? And this album came out, and you put it in the CD player, and it was like a punch in the face. You had never heard music like this. It was a concept album, something I was not familiar with, right? Yeah. And now I am very familiar with it. And, it's a concept album is the kind of thing done wrong. You get Garth Brooks's Chris Gaines, right? You get something unlistenable that is a joke. And done right, you get the greatest concept album ever put now, which is The Wall. But the second one is David Bowie's Outside. I joke. I think Outside's better. Actually, Ziggy Stardust is better than The Wall, probably.
Agreed.
But you get something like Outside. And this is 1985. This album comes out. And it is just so different. It has some classic Bowie stuff with like saxophones and whatnot, a little bit of that, right? But it's got a ton of this industrial edge and some very early EDM type feelings, but with also this incredible guitar riffs, right? It is just a musical hot mess. Not a phrase I like, but that's what it was, right? Mm. And it just opened all kinds of doors. The concept was about a detective, trying to solve a murder that was called an art crime. Very disturbing stuff. I actually set, at some point in listening to the album very early, I set that story aside because I didn't care. Because on its own, each song in the album was brilliant. So I knew about it. I knew it was coming out. I got the album right before it came out. I did not know this, but Bowie brought it to the United States by showing up on David Letterman and doing a live set on, doing Heart's Filthy Lesson live on David Letterman. And I wish I would have been able to see it live at the time. But he came out in this weird leather thing with his spiky, blonde hair and his bizarre-looking band of incredible musicians. Gail Ann Dorsey on bass, Reeves Gabrel on guitar, Sterling Campbell on the drums. I mean, it was just incredible. It was also incredibly weird and wonderful. And David Letterman was actually joking because Bowie had this full leather outfit on, including a leather jacket, leather pants, and a leather shirt. But, I only wear my leather shirts to church. But Letterman also made the joke that he was trying to do some work outside over the weekend, and he felt like he wished he would have been dressed in all leather. He might have been more. It was just bizarre. Might have been more effective, kind of trying to make fun of it. Anyways, I'm rambling here. This album had such an impact on me, and why is it right? So it cemented me as a David Bowie fan. And it carried through all the years as I listened to Bowie and I listened to everything he ever did. The one album that I would always come back to was Outside. You could listen start to finish. It did have these little vignettes where they told the story. I would skip those, frankly, didn't care, and just go to the music. They also had live shows at the time, and you could get live bootlegs. We've had a discussion in the past on digital versus physical. The ability to get bootlegs recorded at concerts was an amazing thing that sort of the peer-to-peer networks like BearShare and LimeWire brought to you, when you could find a real file. This album, though, is incredible. You never listened to anything like it. The interesting thing is it's not something I listen to today. I've moved on from that music. I no longer listen to Bowie. If it's on, I'll listen to it, but I don't seek it out. But at the time, the impact on me was I listened to that album for 25 years, and probably no album has been listened to more. I know you love it too, right?
I do, and
I loved it. I don't know. It's a tough one for me, folks, because I stopped listening to it just because I was trying to get things out of my life that I didn't feel were the right things. And I feel like I should clarify that, right? I'm not like, I don't want to talk about something that I no longer listen to or do Boy, I'm really struggling with the right words here, Chris. I think you probably get the point.
Actually, I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had kind of extricated that from your life.
I just sort of removed things from my life that were. I became very focused on it. I realized maybe I'm too focused on them.
And if you feel that way, then respect. Me, I probably, it was last week I last listened to Outside.
Yeah. Because it's darn good.
And I'm a massive David Bowie fan and have all the albums, listen to them constantly. And Outside, even among a man whose body of work is jaw-droppingly good, Outside is amazing. And it is a killer album. You spoke about the kind of interstitial narrative bits that fill out the story. I agree with you. Every 10th time I'll listen to Outside, I'll do it top to bottom. But most of the time I will skip those and get to the next song. But it is a masterpiece, and bears mentioning that Brian Eno produced it.
I had that in my notes. Bowie
and,
Eno is on my notes. Because Brian Eno is a genius, and everything he touches,
it turns to gold.
Brilliant.
Yes.
I promised myself I'd never say brilliant on the podcast again because it was pointed out to me that I said it like 800 times in our third episode. So I apologize.
So, we had one brilliant strike.
You're allowed to say it, I guess.
Yes. So, no, it was a great album, great choice. Anything else you want to say about Outside?
It's if you listened to it today, it would still feel as fresh,
absolutely,
and more fresh and creative than anything else out there. It's absolutely timeless.
Agreed.
As is a lot of the music for the 90s. I know people always say they like the music that they grew up with. But, there's something about a lot of the 90s music.
Yeah.
And that's why I joke about what the kids like. But the kids are wearing Nirvana t-shirts. The kids are wearing, other bands, right? And, they mourn the loss of folks like Chris Cornell, who passed away. They feel that sadness because there's something about the music from that era. We're going to talk, I'm sure, more about it before this is over. But
I think we have a topic of 90s music on deck.
Well, yes, and I think in this, certainly I'll bring more in this conversation. But yes.
I know 2 of my 3 albums are from the 90s.
So are mine. Yeah. Oh, boy.
Here we go. All right. So anyway, Outside is a great choice. So I'm going to go way different for my first album out of the gate. And this is not a 90s album. It has no connection that I'm aware of to David Bowie, and I'm cheating just a little bit because the album I'm going to bring for my first one that was a hugely influential album in my life is Negotiations and Love Songs, which is Paul Simon's greatest hits album. And I'm choosing his greatest hits album because that means I didn't have to choose from the albums he recorded which one was most influential.
I thought true fans didn't watch or didn't listen to greatest hits.
That's a fair comment to make, but we're going to go with this because it's got a fantastic assortment of Simon's music, and I'm a huge Paul Simon fan. To kind of put that into context, imagine me in high school, just got my driver's license. Everybody else is rocking out to Nirvana and Pearl Jam, and I pull up and roll down my windows, and it's me and Julio down by the schoolyard is what's playing. So I had a lot of friends in high school, of course.
Yes.
But no, I think Paul Simon is probably the greatest lyricist that we've ever had in music. He can put heartbreak into a song like nobody else. And I tend to listen to this album anytime I'm feeling a little down, I'm feeling a little blue, which is maybe not what I should do when you've got an album with songs like Slip Sliding Away on it. That's maybe not the best depression music to pull out.
No.
But it warms my heart, and it means so much to me. And some standouts from that album, I already mentioned Me and Julio Down by the Schoolyard. Hearts and Bones, which is one of the most heartbreaking relationship songs you'll ever hear. Slip Sliding Away, which I think is the saddest song ever written.
Hearts and Bones, I'm not sure I've ever heard that song.
Oh, it's such a gorgeous song. It contains the line, "You take 2 bodies and twirl them into one. They're hearts and bones, they won't come undone."
Wow. All right, I might have to listen. I'll pirate that tonight.
I could have picked virtually any Paul Simon album and spoken and advocated for it being a very influential album in my life. I just think he's amazing. And even now, he's got an album on deck to release in June. I can't wait for it. So that's my Paul Simon nod. I'm a big fan.
Well, so I got a question for you. You mentioned that you listen to those things. Is there any connection to anything you're doing today other than that, or is it just like a go-to for you when you need that?
It's a go-to for me, and it's one of those things. Introduced to Paul Simon in my youth, really, through Simon and Garfunkel, and love all those albums. But to me, Paul Simon as a solo artist is really where he came into his own.
Also, that video with Chevy Chase.
Oh, absolutely! You can call me out.
Yeah, that's a great video. Yeah, Chevy Chase improvised all that. By the way.
Right? He was learning the lyrics on his way over to the studio.
Yep,
is what he said. But yeah, I mean, just all it's kind of like America's songbook to me is Paul Simon, and I just adore him. I just think his turn of phrases is amazing. Musically, he's amazing. His finger picking guitar style is unprecedented. When I put this song or this album on, or any Paul Simon album on, I'm taken away to a philosophical place, to a very introspective place. And it's a lot of memories. He's got one song called "The Obvious Child," and there's a line in the song that's he takes his yearbook down from the shelf. Some of them have died, some of them have fled from themselves. And it's just poetry, like I said. Set the music. So,
one thing I'll say about Paul Simon too, in terms of the quality of his voice, I'm not a huge Paul Simon fan, but I certainly appreciate it. Listen to him in the 70s, listen to him now. He sounds like he has not aged a day. And most artists, there's a change, right? Registers lower. There's a whole bunch of stuff, right? I'm not a musical person, but he sounds just as brilliant.
He did a YouTube video in the heart of lockdown where he sang American Tune just outside in his backyard. And there was a bird that just stayed on the limb above him the whole time and chirped through the whole song. And it was one of those things that we'd been in our homes for weeks. We didn't know anything about COVID yet. We didn't know if this was like the Stand situation, if we were going to come out of this or not. And watching him on YouTube sing American Tune, it just moved me. I wept at my computer for 20 minutes. And anytime you have someone, I do tend to get very emotional at music. And that's one thing that I tend to value it more than other forms of media because it does affect me so much. And so you add Paul Simon's ability as lyricist to my already soft heart, and it's just over.
He is, that's a really interesting choice. So I would not have expected that, but certainly beautiful music. I guess you would say he's better than Neil Diamond.
I'm a big Neil Diamond fan, though.
Too.
I mean, come on.
So, for my next item, I set the stage in my last one, right? So these are connected, right? So you move from one into the other, right? So I set the stage with 1997 me. Mm-hmm. I am considerably thinner. I'm about 90 pounds thinner. Best shape of my life.
Yeah.
Working at got a job as a computer operator with my cool 1990 Mitsubishi Eclipse. David Bowie's Outside blaring. And I could take my future wife, my lovely wife, Mary, on our first date. And I'd be able to pick her up at her house. We get into my very cool car. It's gold. I think I mentioned that.
You did.
It's gold. Folks, that's how cool it was. I want you to get that 97 mindset in your head. And I turn on the car. And this music comes out of it. This Outside, right? This sort of eclectic shotgun blast.
And if you're not ready for that.
Yeah. And she, after a few minutes, she goes, "What are you listening to?" And I realized at that point, I love this girl, but we go on our first date. We're about 30 minutes into it, and then she slights my music. But we found a common ground, right? So I got a 6-disc changer, right?
Sure.
I got other discs in the 6-disc changer, right? Of course I do. I've got the remote control for the 6-disc changer velcroed to some place in the car, convenient, extremely safe. So I find another album, and this is like, I think that this is maybe the best or most iconic album of, it is the best and the most iconic album of the alternative music genre of the 90s, and that is Melancholy and the Infinite Sadness. Oh. And that is a shared, that she actually liked that. We both liked that. And as long as I never put on any of that other noise, she was very happy. And my wife and I dated for a very short period of time before getting engaged, and then we got married. And that was music that for many years that represented, for a decade, until the Killers came about, that represented the only music we agreed on. Wow. was the Smashing Pumpkins broadly, but most specifically focused on that album, that 28-track opus, double disc album, that Melancholy Infinite Sadness, a very loose concept album. Billy Corgan, leader, Billy Corgan is the Smashing Pumpkins as far as I'm concerned, said, it's not really a concept album, but if you're going to put it in a frame, it's about someone experiencing a day, right? The emotions that you feel. There's the day side and disc 1 and the night side and disc 2. Brilliant album, 6 singles from it. For me, it is the ultimate alternative music album. I love other bands, Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains. There was other brilliant music from that period. I left Nirvana out for a reason, folks. I think it's not good. It's not good.
They have talent. Anyway,
we just burned an episode. But anyway, that album represented a connection. We both okay, we like this. This is cool. And we listened to it for years. The lead, the opening song, which I think is called Melancholy, and the piano. We would wake up to that. We had it set. We still enjoy it when those songs come on. Incidentally, I don't listen to this album very much. There's a couple songs on there that I don't care for because Billy Corgan, who is a professing Christian now, and has been for many years, at the time had a real issue and put some lyrics in there that I didn't like in some of the songs. So I kind of avoid some of those, but there's many that I still like. It's not one that I go back to as often as I should, but if something comes on, my wife and I still will enjoy it. And it's so meaningful to me because it was, it's like, oh no. And she told me, she said, I'm surprised I continued dating you when it was Hallow Space Boy from the outside. Folks, if you've never listened to it, put Hallow Space Boy on. There's a pretty good chance you'll feel, you might appreciate the music, but you'll wonder, man, this is pretty darn weird. And but she continued dating me, and now we've been married for 25 years with 4 children. And I credit Billy Corgan. Thank you, Billy, for giving me my wife.
That's a great story.
It's totally true. I mean, you think about it, just to speak about the album. What a successful album from that. Yeah. But the album before that was Siamese Dream, is another one that in the 90s, you go and you look at the CD collection in the car, everyone had that album. Yes, everyone had Melancholy. It was like for example, other albums like Pearl Jam's Vitology, everybody owned that, but nobody listened to it. Everybody owned these Smashing Pumpkins songs and did listen to them. But huge impact to me, very meaningful.
It's a great album by a great band. And it's a good choice. And when you were talking it up, like the alternative album, I was really questioning where you were going to go and was thinking I'm going to object to calling it. But then when you said Melancholy, that's fair. That you could point to that and say that is the definitive alternative rock album. And you could make that argument. It's great.
He wanted to make The Wall for his generation, and I believe he did.
I love even at the time when it was released, I loved the audacity of this band being like, we're going to do a double record.
Yes.
And that was not done back then. The double record had its time, 60s and 70s, and then it really went away for the 80s and 90s. And the fact that Smashing Pumpkins was like, we're going to do this. Now, I have a pet peeve about it because it was a double record, which means it was more expensive.
Yep.
And I had 3 copies of this album, and for whatever reason, they all kept getting destroyed by other people.
Really? Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm sure I did at least 2 of them.
No,
it
wasn't you, but it was like, I remember one time a bunch of us were going to the lake for a day, and we packed a big cooler, and it was in the trunk, and the cooler slid and just completely obliterated the CDs, which were also in the trunk. So, and I kept having to re-buy this album, and it wasn't
expensive.
cheap. Yeah. So, but I still own a copy on CD. Have it.
Well, I think you just made a case for digital and the physical versus digital. If you want to listen to episode 5, folks,
that's fair. That's fair. But it's a great album. And 1979 is a standout song on that double album for me. I love that song.
Good song.
So much.
I'm gonna say a little burned out on it when you've heard it too. Yeah, but no, it's a good song. I just I really like 33 on that album.
It's a great song. I don't know that I can get burned out on 79. I've listened to that.
That video, I think, though, like that album represents the 90s alternative, the video for that and Bullet for Butterfly Wings, which came out like back to back, Bullet, which, good Lord, he did not mean it to be a tongue twister. I'm just incapable of speaking. Bullet with Butterfly Wings was their first single. I think 1979 was their second single. Those videos came back to back. And they just ruled MTV. They were on constantly. And the 1979 videos where he unveiled his shaved head.
Yes, it was
shocking. I was like, where did that guy's bowl haircut go?
And something else that the Pumpkins did was when they released a single, there were reasons to buy that.
Because the B-sides were fantastic.
Yeah, I remember having that album. I remember having all those singles. Man, yeah, those were good times.
They collected all those B-sides into an album set, The Airplane Flies High.
Yes, and it was box set with like a big black and white box.
Very expensive.
I never could afford it.
I just downloaded it. I pirated it. I did back in the day, and then I felt bad, and now I just subscribe to a service that's like water. I turned it on. And,
exactly, yeah. And since you pay that monthly, you've well recouped whatever you stole from the Pumpkins. I think it's okay. All right, my next album. 1993, I think is when it was released. If I'm wrong about that, I sincerely apologize. But it is Counting Crows, August, and Everything After.
All right.
Did not expect that one.
I did not.
I can tell by your facial expression. So this
is a good album.
It is a good album. I vividly remember buying this album at a Walmart because my parents were there, and I was looking through the CD section, and the single Mr. Jones had been on MTV, and I liked that song, and I liked him dancing around with his dreadlocks.
Adam Duritz out there. Yep.
I liked that song, and I saw on the album they had a little sticker that was like Rolling Stones gave this album 5 stars. Like that means anything.
No, right.
But at 13 years old or whatever, I was like, ooh, 5 stars, Rolling Stone, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, based on
Jagger loves this album. I'm confused about what the magic magazine is.
Based on one song, I bought a CD, which was not like me. I mean, I had a strict rule, like 3-song buy CD kind of process.
Should have Columbia housed it.
That's a different episode. So anyway, I bought this album, and I was not prepared for the depth that this album went. Do you know the album, or do you just know Mr. Jones?
I know the singles from that album, right? And that you would have been 14 at the time, right?
Probably somewhere in there. Yeah,
that's important. That context is important, I think.
It is, maybe because I still think I'm 14.
Yes,
like in my head, and I don't mean that as like a maturity thing. Like that's where I feel like that's where I that was my time. Yep. and my entire life since then has just been trying to go back to
stay
that.
Right, yeah, you want to stay in that.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I started with this poppy Mr. Jones song and put the record in, and the first track on the record is Round Here, which is shockingly beautiful.
Yes.
It's stunning. Again, the writing is so good. The opening lines of the song, step out the front door like a ghost into the fog when no one notices the contrast of white on white. You got me. I'm there. I'm listening to the whole thing.
Between the moon and you, angels get a better view.
The crumbling distance, between wrong and right.
Yes. Yeah. Really very poetic.
It's fantastic. Yep. And
it made Morrissey sad.
But the whole album's like that. And honestly, there's only like 2 upbeat songs on the whole album. And the rest of them are more like Round Here, really contemplative kind of tracks. Yep. And if you're listening to my influential albums, you're now understanding this introspective, contemplative kind of, this is my jam. This is what I listen to. So Counting Crows is one, and at the time when I was 14, I had this album and I was like, wow, that is a stunningly good album. Did not expect it to be that good just from liking this one song. And it stayed in fairly constant rotation through my teenage years. years. But what shocked me is it stayed in fairly constant rotation for my entire life.
Yeah.
Like even when, I was like, oh, okay, well the 90s are over. I'm moving on. I'm exploring different music, different genre, that kind of thing. Man, I always had a copy of this album, and it always saw regular play with what I was doing. And it's so good. And you would think that this would turn me into a giant Counting Crows fan. I appreciate their other albums. I appreciate them as a band. They never recaptured this. I mean,
Interesting.
There was magic in this album. And if you know anything about the Counting Crows, fascinating story. Adam Duritz is diagnosed schizophrenic. And so it was a challenge a lot of times. And he talks about being on stage, and sometimes he would be on stage and his schizophrenia would kick in and he wouldn't know the lyrics. He would be like, I'm not a singer. What's going on here? So some fascinating history, some fascinating stories. And he really talks about the using music and using song to help him with that struggle that he's had, and the fact that they've been able to continue on as a band even with that. I mean, it's a pretty remarkable story, and they have all my respect as musicians, but I mean, to me, that debut album is just so good and so amazing. They never topped it, but hey, I'm glad that they released it, and it means a lot to me.
Wow, not unexpected, but yeah, that Round Here is a beautiful, haunting song that on its own that can have a lot of impact.
Yes, definitely.
Well, you and I were talking before the show, and I said this was a tough one. And when we first had it on our, we have a process, folks. It's extremely scientific and what we decided to do is like, this is going to be an easy one. This is a slam dunk. I got 3 favorite albums, and then as I thought about it, I was like, this is not our 3 favorite albums. I think we covered that, right? And then I realized I got to dig deep. I got to find meaning. And you saw that, I think, through there. The Bowie one was really represented a lifelong, fandom. Also great music, right? The Smashing Pumpkins represented a connection with my wife. And the third one, though, I really struggled on this, Chris.
Okay. Because
I want this to be meaningful, right? And so I had to be real. And this one, boy, let me start it out here. While my mom was dying in the hospital, that's how I like to start that. Start stories that way. My mom passed away several years back, and she died, in the hospital. She was unplugged from, life support machines. It's an awful situation, and you'd be there during the day with her, and then you'd be exhausted. The whole family was exhausted. This went on for 6 days. And I'd go to the car and to drive home, and there was one album I listened to, and on the way there and on the way back, and I have no idea why it worked out this way, but it did. It was just in there, and in my, at the time, MP3 player connected to an aux jack in the car, and 'cause this was, 15 years ago at this point, 14 years ago, 15, 16. Very, very terrible situation. But there was an album that I listened to, and it brought me a little bit of comfort. And even if it was just the distraction of the beautiful music. And interestingly enough, it's another Billy Corgan album. Zwan. I don't know. Are you familiar with Zwan?
I am, yeah.
So after Billy Corgan and the Smashing Pumpkins, fell apart, which is how it happened. A few years later, he formed, they call it a super group. It's not a super group. There was nothing super about it other than Billy Corgan. But he founded another band called Zwan, and it was radically different, upbeat, beautiful music. And it represented a change that lasted with Corgan for 5 or 6 years, where his music took a different direction. He talked a lot more about God and his feelings and his failings. The album was Mary Star of the Sea, the only album Zwan released. Absolutely beautiful stuff. I would put it up against anything he did with the Pumpkins and say it's nearly as good. And it had one song in particular, and this was the song I listened to on the way. I get stuck on albums, and I'll listen to an album over and over. But I typically don't get stuck on songs and listen to them over and over. For whatever reason, this song helped me be calm and focused when I would go up to the hospital, and then I'd go home, and it really brought me a degree of comfort. And that was Mary Star of the Sea. It was actually a very long track, 12 minutes long. It was called Jesus I / Mary Star of the Sea. And I don't typically like songs that, that use the Lord's name in vain or sort of, but it had a very positive tone because Corrigan was working to refine his religious roots. Beautiful song though, and it brought me a great deal of comfort. And so I'm telling you, Chris, when you say we're going to find songs with meaning, I had to go here, right? Sure. I had to say this one means something to me because it was there for me in a difficult time of my life when we were, a difficult, stressful, very, very strained relationship with my mother across the board, across all 5 of her kids. My brother was still with us at the time. We were all in the room together. There was tension. There was disagreements about care. Care was out of our hands. And, to our listeners, you may have been in situations where you've had family members pass on and, the terrible decisions that go with it. And sometimes there's living wills and they make decisions for you. And that often seems like helpful, but sometimes when they make decisions that seem very, like, oh boy, you could have had a little bit more life-saving help. That's really tough to live through, right? And it was hard, right? We'd be in this hospital room, small hospital room, and sitting through it. And I got to the car, I turned the car on, and I'd hit the back button, and I'd start that song over and listen to it twice on my long drive home. It was a 12-minute song, so. And that brought me meaning. I still love that album. I could listen to that album start to finish. It does not have a negative, it doesn't make me want to weep because actually it was helpful. Now, where I'm at today, I probably wouldn't need music as much because at the time I was not particularly spiritually centered. I think I'd find comfort in other things. I'd still listen to that. Still would be nice to have really good music, positive music as a distraction. But at the time I I didn't have a good spiritual connection personally. And I helped, find that meaning in the music. So, you asked for it is all I'm going to say when you put this topic out there.
That's okay. And you have come at these 3 albums in a very different way than I did. And you had these moments in your life where these albums were there was a connection, and it represented something. And I think my albums, I came at it more as like, these are the albums I listen to get me through life, kind of a thing. And I think of these as kind of like my mental health albums, when I'm in a dark place or something like that. I can wallow in a dark place just long enough with Paul Simon, and then I'll come out of it.
Yep.
Or I can think about something that I need to think about, listening to Adam Duritz go through his beautiful lyrical poetry just long enough, and then I can come out of it. So 2 very different approaches, and both valid in their own right, but what an amazing story. And I'm glad that you had something during that time to bring you that comfort, and you've talked a lot about spirituality. I kind of take a different perspective when it comes to art and spirituality, in the fact that I don't necessarily need my artists to likewise be spiritual. Like, I can still find meaning in that art for me, and something in that, like, I could take, I could probably take the most inappropriate song you could think of, and if there's something in there that resonates with me, I can be like, okay, well, spiritually, whether they meant it or not, it means something to me. And it's there's something positive I'm pulling out of that.
And the artist would be like, well, you've got it wrong. This is about something like
absolutely
very vulgar. And, but Sir Mix-a-Lot, I know the big butts you're talking about not smoking. Yeah. I know it's got nothing to do with that. Sir Mix-a-Lot sounds just like me. I don't know. Is it Sir Mix-a-Lot that sings I've got big?
Yes.
Okay.
Is,
well, I almost went there. Please edit that whole section out.
I'm not sure that I will.
Okay.
Anyway, but to that point, I think that the interpretation of art is there. And so, where am I going with this?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Yes. So you don't feel when there is a something you have in common with the artist, you don't feel like that connection is enhanced?
No, I do.
Okay. So you do, right? Okay.
And there are some artists that have egregious behavior that make me not.
Yes.
And I'll throw one out there. I used to be a huge Oasis fan.
Yep.
And just the way they behave, I just can't. It turns my stomach, and I can't. And when I listen to it, you can't. And there are plenty of other artists that have shown their true colors.
Roger Waters. It's tough for me to listen to some Pink Floyd, but some of Roger Waters stuff, because the guy's got some weird ideas, and it's really tough.
I've always been on the David Gilmour side of that argument.
Well, I still think Roger Waters was. I think they were best when they were together.
Oh yeah.
But Gilmour was clearly a more talented musician. We were gone off the rails, but I think that. I think that it's having something in common with the artist for me makes a huge difference, right? And I think when we're done, I think maybe we could just really quickly, when we've got all three of them out there, we can talk about people who didn't get on the list that maybe, were like close, right? But just didn't quite make the cut.
And I guess the point that I'm making is, I think you can, I almost feel like that spiritual connection is less about me and the artist and more about me and God.
No.
And there are some things that were never intended as pro-Christian pieces of art, but I kind of see them that way, and to me, that's my interpretation, and that's meaningful to me, and that makes a connection.
Very interesting.
Anyway, so and that just kind of came up with some of the things that you'd said about some of your albums. I think you had three great choices and three great reasons for choosing them. And I'll go ahead and share my third one now, which is another very introspective, very heartbreaky kind of album. This one I know you're familiar with, and this one might be one that you could have guessed.
The Crash Test Dummies.
No.
Oh, okay.
Wow. No. This album is Peter Gabriel's Us.
Oh my goodness. I was just thinking about, when you said songs about that have no spiritual meaning you find, I was thinking about Peter Gabriel's Indigo, which was from I think the Car Crash album or something. It hit a weird way. Mm-hmm. But Us is, oh my goodness.
So, and anytime anybody talks about Peter Gabriel, the album So gets all the attention.
Yes.
Which is a great album.
It had the videos. It was them in VH1 a lot, right? Because it was a really good video. Some really good videos.
Yeah, but Us is the next album that Gabriel released. And it is such a good album that even saying it's a good album is an understatement. And this album, it's such a stunning study of love in just about every capacity. He was going through a divorce when he wrote and recorded this album. So it's a study of love from separation. It's a study of love from two people coming together. It's a study of love of parent to child. It's a study of love of where are you in your life, and can you love yourself, and what do you do with the bad emotions that you have, that everybody has, and how do you wrestle with that? And then on top of that, it's got Kiss the Frog on
that's
there.
The one goofball song, right? He only did one goofball song that album.
But still, you almost needed that. Like at the end, by the time you get to the end of that album, you're emotionally destroyed, and then you get Kiss the Frog, and you're like, oh, okay.
His little fairy tale song, right?
Yeah.
And he does those are fairy tales, right? I would describe that, and a lot of the stuff on So, right? He just sort of has these little stories he's going to tell that are funny and that musically are brilliant. But boy, man, there is a really dark through line through his library that I say dark. Maybe deep, and I don't think any one album shows it better than Us.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. And Us it's magical. And I had this album on cassette, and I would come home and I'd have probably 2 hours from getting home from school to my parents coming home. And I would come home every day from school and I would throw the cassette in my dad's giant stereo, not my little Walkman or my little stereo in my room, but my dad's big boom box. I would throw Us in there and I just started playing, and I would just sit and listen until I heard the car outside, and then I'd stop it and pull it out and hide it. I don't know why as a child I felt like I needed to hide everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cause there's absolutely nothing.
No, it is, it's squeaky clean.
Yeah,
right?
It really is. But I don't know. I always had that sense And it wasn't even like I need to hide this because it's inappropriate. It's like I need to hide this because I like it.
Right.
Like, I couldn't. I don't know
it's
why.
Personal.
Yeah. Maybe that's.
It's like your diary, right? Like you lock the diary.
Right. Yeah. Right? And I would just do this. And you made the comment when you were talking about Zwan that you'll get hooked on an album and you'll just listen to it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think for me, Us has the record where I listened to nothing but Us for like 3 months.
Well, and you know what? Beginning to end, completely listenable. You don't skip a track.
Yes.
Even when you're burned out on Steam, which that is a burnout song, right? There are some songs that just, and that's one of them. But wow, yeah.
But it's one of those albums that it keeps revealing itself to you. I mean, there's the second track on the album is called "Love to Be Loved."
Yep,
and it's a gorgeous song. And I swear to you, I was in my 40s before I put it together. I was like, okay, wait a second. Love to be loved, as in I enjoy being loved, or love to be loved, as in I love in order to be loved. And like one day I was just listening to that, and I was like, oh my word, and suddenly the whole song unfolded in a different way. And there's a song on the album called Secret World,
yes,
which is the most gorgeous unrequited love song ever written. And so, I mean, like anytime I listen to this album, it's just like I'm going through every possible emotion a human can feel in like a 63-minute runtime or whatever the album is. And it's so good. And I was at one of our local used commodity stores where they sell anything they can put a price tag on. And I saw this album in like the 99-cent CD bin, and it crushed me. And I had to buy. I bought it to save it.
You bought it to save it?
Yes, because it's like how could people not know this album? And it's so good. And Gabriel's got one of those voices that it's so on point. He's such a talented singer, and it is rare for an artist to be able to be like, you know what, I'm going to wait 12, 15 years between albums. And then when they drop one, everybody's like super excited, and Gabriel's one of those artists that he can do that. And golly, Us is such a meaningful album to me. And and again, just like the other two, these are the things that I put on when I'm trying to figure it all out for myself. And this is my background music to figure out, this huge emotional weight is on my shoulders, and how do I solve this? And I do that while listening to Peter Gabriel. I love this album just as much as you did, right? At the time, we were both very much into it. I think I'm trying to remember what the entree was into Peter Gabriel. Was it just the VH1 videos? Yeah. Well, maybe this is not true, but I remember Gabriel doing Steam on Saturday Night Live.
Okay.
And that's the first recollection I have of hearing the song Steam, which is a great song. Like you say, you tire of it after a while, which I would agree. But to hear a song and just be like, oh, immediately, hey, I like that song. And then it was from there, we had a shared cassette tape where we taped songs off of the radio.
Oh yeah,
because you did that back in the day.
I did. Oh yeah,
and it had Steam on it. And then finally, one of us was just like, we're just going to buy this album.
Yep. And it was so worth it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So good.
Gosh, that's a really good one. It's funny if I do listen to that album occasionally, and I actually have a kind of a Peter Gabriel playlist where I have curated the best stuff from the beginning of his solo career, to some of the more recent things, and several tracks from that album are on there, and I really do enjoy it. If I put it on when my wife is in the car, my lovely wife, I'm going to preface that. Right? My lovely wife, before I say this, she'll if one of those songs come on, she'll say, "What's this?" And then I know I have to dutifully hit the next track.
Not into Peter Gabriel.
Not into that album particularly, or any of the earlier stuff. Some of the later stuff is a little bit more. I'm having trouble remembering because unfortunately he became he was not the most productive to begin with, but after after Us, rather, excuse me, it really dropped off. But that is a great choice. I love that album. What's going to happen tomorrow is when I work and I've got my not in meetings time, I'm going to listen to that album. Yeah. And I'll probably go back and listen to So, because it does have some beautiful songs.
It does
too.
Absolutely. Rain. I mean, all of his albums. I mean, not all of them are top to bottom great, but all of them have songs that will blow you away. Even I'm least hot on his first one, Car.
Is that Car? Is
Yeah.
that I can't see that got weird with his naming, and I don't.
Right.
I just know them as the albums before So.
Before So.
Really,
Yeah. No,
it's
that's
one
fair.
big lump of work.
But his first solo album was all. So his first 4 solo albums are just all called Peter Gabriel.
Yeah.
But because of their cover, fans refer to them as Car, Melt,
Nails or something. Was just doing the screechy, whatever, the Wolverine thing. Yeah. Anyway, we have lost every listener.
Well, anyway, I'll say Car is the least successful album for me, but Car has Salisbury Hill.
Salisbury Hill's beautiful. How beautiful song. In how many movies have little Salisbury Hill or movie trailers but the hero's got to go get the.
But I mean, for crying out loud, if
beautiful.
you put Salisbury Hill on any album, suddenly that becomes one of the greatest albums ever.
Which album has Moribund the Burgermeister on there? I love that song.
I think it's Melt.
Is it Melt? Yeah, that's one when it comes on. My wife's like, "Please turn this. You have to turn this." And so I know, my lovely wife. I didn't say, "Gosh darn it, I'm working on that." That's a good one, and we share that because we both listen to that. I think there's some honorable mentions that I have a couple, right?
Okay, I have at least one. So sure.
I've got really quickly. We've mentioned a few times the Killers, and I have a great love of the Killers. I think they made a couple really bad albums in the middle of their career, but they're coming back strong. And I have a particular love for Brandon Flowers. And we talked about like having a connection with people, have a connection. He's a family man. He seems like a great guy. Comes from extremely modest means. His first solo album, Flamingo, is so good. And it's like it tells a story, right? He doesn't come out and say, here's a concept album. He's not like, he doesn't have that conceit, right? However, it tells a story. It tells a story of him, growing his teenage years in Vegas. And it's also like some hymns too, right? I mean, there are some. Magdalena is a straight up hymn to this kind of bouncy, country-ish theme. Beautiful, and that album is, one that can invoke emotion in me. I wanted to put it on a list, but I couldn't I was tying things. I was anchoring things, right, and finding through lines, and that one just didn't quite make the fit. And then I've gotta give a shout out to U2, and I'm gonna say that, everyone, Octoon Baby is not my favorite U2 album, but probably the most like you listen to it and like Outside, you're experiencing a new thing. Yeah. And so that's, made a huge impact on me. But the problem is with that one, I'd already loved U2. And so it wasn't like it introduced me to something. It just, it was just continuing and making me like something even more because I'd already fell in love with the Joshua Tree and Rattle and Hum and Unforgettable Fire and, previous work. So, but those were a couple of honorable mentions.
Good,
Flamingo got close, but it was that and Zwan. And I was like, okay, if I'm honest about impact,
sure.
And I also wanted to do that intro to see what you would do.
Just how many losers we lose, or how many losers we lose.
Hey, I'd like to negative watch this show. Do you have a down button? Down.
So good ones. I intentionally did not put any U2 albums or any David Bowie albums on my list, just because that would have been the 3 and it would have been done. So Octoon, of course, is the seminal album of their career. I mean, it's one of those few pieces of art that you can say is more than the sum of its parts. And I honestly think if I'm ever critical of U2, I honestly think to their detriment, Bono's been chasing Octoon Baby since he wrote it.
Goodness. Oh boy. I don't know if I agree with that. I will say I respectfully disagree. Maybe we have a conversation about this at a later time. Because
I've got some pretty strong evidence. Anyway.
Well, you might. I think you've investigated it more than I do. And
so, but what a fantastic album. Brandon Flowers, I love. Killers, I love. I'm curious your statement that in the middle of their career they had a few bad albums.
Yeah, Wonderful, and the other one that was before or after Wonderful, and I can't.
Battleborn?
No, I love Battleborn.
Okay.
Hush Your Mouth.
I'm sorry.
That's a brilliant album.
Okay.
I listened to that on the way to Columbia. Well, I recently drove my car to the country of Columbia. We recently took it.
So was it the
Wonderful, Wonderful, and the something, something, something. I can't remember what the other album was.
Which got the painting of the two people like in the sky. Is that the cover of it?
Since I do everything digitally, you
fair,
sort of lose that. Boy, that's another thing we didn't. Oh boy, I'm referring to a past episode. Yeah. Album art.
We got to move forward. Anyway, I think I would disagree with you on the Killers making bad.
Okay, I did not. Did you like Brandon Flowers' second album?
Not as much as Flamingo.
Yeah,
but I did like it.
To me, it lacked the depth, right? And that's one of the things. Right? Somebody does something brilliant. You either have to retire or accept.
Imploding the Mirage.
Imploding the Mirage. I dislike that song. Wasn't that the one that keep the climbing? There's a song "Keep Climbing Up a Wall" or something. That's a pretty good one.
I like that album. Wonderful, Wonderful had a few missteps, although the song "Rut" is undeniably gorgeous.
Yeah, Rut. That's what I was getting at. Yeah, there's a couple other, but Rut is a beautiful song.
Yes, it is.
And as a single, I could listen to that, and it did. We listened to it.
But I thought "Imploding the Mirage" was fantastic.
All right. Well, anyway, it's a disagreement.
We'll do a Killers episode in the future sometime.
Maybe. I think we just did it.
So my honorable mention is Pink Floyd, "Dark Side of the Moon."
Wow, for impact. Well, listen, I love the album.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
But again, going with my theme of introspective, this is what I listen to when I kind of crawl inside my own skin, kind of a thing. Dark Side it's a killer album. I mean, just the way it's structured, the songs on it, the kind of atmospheric use of music, it's stunning. And it's another one of those albums where about every October, I'll just like feel it crawling into my brain, and I know it's going to start soon, and then I'll listen to it for all of winter, kind of a thing.
Time is just. I think it's the best song on the album, and it's.
But I think you could argue that The Wall is a more complete experience than Dark Side, but I will always prefer Dark Side as an album.
I actually prefer the Final Cut, which is the album after The Wall.
That is a hot take.
That is a hot take, but I love that album.
Yeah.
And I also realized that it exposed Roger Waters as a complete maniac.
Yeah.
Boy, how far off track have we gotten here? And if Roger Waters is listening, you know what, Roger? Go to middleageguys.com. I'm not going to spell it all out, Roger. I know you know how to spell it. And email us. And other listeners, even if your name isn't Roger Waters, we'd love to hear from you as well. I think that what we covered today, it shows the impact that music has on everyone's life, right?
Yeah.
And, we could go into like movie soundtracks, and we could talk about the Chess soundtrack and embarrass ourselves, and One Night in Bangkok and Murray Head. You could go so many different directions, because I remember we listened to the crap out of that Chess soundtrack. Don't pretend we haven't.
I was at the library book sale yesterday, and they have a pretty impressive selection of CDs, and I bought a copy of Chess.
That I cannot believe you did that. I can't believe we mentioned that. The synchronicity that we've been getting on our episodes is incredible. You would think we planned this, but we absolutely did not.
We did not.
I think what it shows, though, is the power of music, right? Different things, right? How it inspires us, and I think moments.
I think that very easily, next year we do another 3 influential albums.
Right. What is meaningful to us now? Because there are things that I'm listening to right now that you are not. I did mention, that people love the 90s. I've really been re-listening to a lot of that, and revisiting that, a lot of the stuff in the 90s that's really popular now. My son wants to go to see a Smashing Pumpkins concert. We're going to go, and but kind of re-listening to that, trying to figure out what made me like it and what's making them like it, and that connection. It's kind of like in the 90s when everybody picked the Beatles back up, right? And we were part of that too, no doubt about it, right? And that cycle exists, and it becomes fresh again. So I've been re-listening, and I think you could do this. You're right. Every year and come with new takes.
I'll tell you the band that I've been revisiting lately, and I did not give them enough credit in the 90s, is Pearl Jam.
Yeah, it's good, right? I like it better than a certain band that I won't talk about, that everybody else seems to think is the best. It's called Nirvana. I mean, I didn't need to talk about it. Pretty good, right? But there was between the big Pearl Jam Smashing Pumpkins rivalry, there was a huge one between Eddie Vedder and Billy Corgan, and so I sided with Billy
I
Corgan.
did not know that.
Vitology was the album that was one of the ones that was in. I joked about nobody listened to it. People did listen to it. I had it. It was in everybody's CD case back in the day.
It absolutely was.
Yeah. Well, so guys, that's what music means.
Yeah. So I know people listening out there, you thought of 3 albums as we were blathering on about ours.
Listen to them. Email us. I want to know what they were, right?
Yeah.
Because it would be ironic if it was outside.
I would love to someday do like a mailbag episode. I think that would be so much
if we
fun.
get any mail,
yes,
we'll do that. How about this? We get mail, and the next episode we record, we're going to read the non-profane, anything clean. We'll read it and respond to it on the podcast.
Absolutely.
All right, and you get a prize. Well, that's the prize.
Right, yeah, because we can't afford.
We have no money.
No,
we have no money.
Absolutely not.
All right.
So maybe in the future we could give you a Dr. Squatch bar or something. If they pick us up for sponsorship.
Of course.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for listening. 3 albums. Go enjoy some music on your own. And until next time, peace out.